There's a very specific kind of frustration that comes from checking your bank account and not seeing a disaster, but also not seeing progress. Nothing dramatic happened. You didn't buy a new couch. You didn't book a luxury vacation. You didn't do anything that would make a good story later. And yet somehow, the month disappeared, and so did your money. Again. You paid your bills, bought groceries, grabbed coffee a few times, ordered food when you were tired, picked up a few little things online, renewed subscriptions you barely think about, and maybe had 1 or 2 weekends where you told yourself, "Come on, I work hard, let me enjoy my life a little." And that sounds reasonable. It is reasonable. That's what makes it so hard to catch. Because the money usually doesn't leave in one loud, obvious move. It leaves quietly. My name is Theodore, and I spend an almost embarrassing amount of time thinking about money, daily habits, and the strange ways people accidentally build a life that keeps them financially stuck without ever doing anything wildly irresponsible. And the more I've watched people struggle with money, the more I've realized that the real problem usually isn't greed or laziness or stupidity. It's that modern life makes wasting money feel normal, comfortable even. And once you see that clearly, something changes. Because this is not really about cutting $500 just for the sake of being good with money. It's about realizing that a lot of what you spend every month isn't actually making your life better. It's just making your life easier to survive for 10 minutes at a time. And those are not the same thing. That's the shift. When you stop asking, "Where did my money go?" and start asking, "What is my money trying to do for me?" you notice things you couldn't see before. You notice that you're paying for convenience, relief, distraction, speed, identity, comfort, escape. You notice that your spending is emotional in very ordinary ways. Not dramatic, just human. And that matters, because if you're wasting $500 a month, the answer usually isn't to become a stricter, sadder person. The answer is to build a life where your money doesn't have to keep rescuing you from your own routines. That's what we're talking about today. Not how to be cheap. How to be free. Because $500 a month is not just $500. It's breathing room. It's options. It's the difference between always feeling vaguely behind and finally feeling like your money is moving in the direction of your life instead of against it. And honestly, the first thing you need to understand is this. Most people are not wasting money because they're reckless. They're wasting money because they're tired. That's it. Or at least, that's a huge piece of it. Tired people spend differently. Stressed people spend differently. People who are overwhelmed, overworked, lonely, disorganized, emotionally drained, or just mentally overloaded do not make the same financial decisions as calm people with full energy and clear routines. They just don't. So when someone says, "I know what I should do, I just never do it," I usually think, no, that's not really the whole story. The whole story is that your life keeps producing moments where the expensive option feels like the only humane option. You get home late. The kitchen is a mess. The groceries you bought with optimism on Sunday now look like a guilt collection. You're starving. Of course takeout feels reasonable. You're bored at night, a little restless, maybe a little discouraged. And suddenly, buying something online feels less like spending and more like giving yourself a tiny emotional lifeline. You forget a bill, miss a deadline, run late, lose track of something. And now, money steps in to fix the friction. That's what a lot of wasted money is. Money used to clean up the emotional and logistical mess of daily life. And once I understood that, I stopped thinking about bad spending the way most people do. Because the problem isn't always the purchase. The problem is the pattern that created the purchase. If you keep spending money to save yourself from your own schedule, your own clutter, your own exhaustion, your own lack of planning, then the money is not the first problem. The money is just the symptom you can measure. That's why some people budget beautifully for a week and then completely unravel. They're trying to control transactions without changing the conditions that make those transactions feel necessary. So, the first real shift, the thing you should do instead of wasting $500 a month, is build more stability into your everyday life. I know that sounds boring. It is boring. It's also wildly effective. Because fragile systems create expensive decisions. If your food plan is fragile, you'll overspend. If your mornings are chaotic, you'll overspend. If your home is disorganized, you'll overspend. If your social life only works through paid activities, you'll overspend. If rest never happens until you're desperate, you'll overspend. The hidden cost of a messy life is almost always financial. I knew someone who kept saying she didn't have enough discipline to save money. And when we looked at her month, the issue wasn't that she loved luxury. It was that every part of her life required emergency decisions. She paid for last-minute meals, rushed transportation, duplicate household items because she couldn't find what she already owned, subscription services she forgot to cancel, convenience purchases after stressful work days, and little rewards anytime the week felt especially cruel. It added up to more than $500 without any single purchase looking outrageous. That's what tricks people. No one transaction seems big enough to matter. But your life is not shaped by single transactions. It's shaped by repeated ones. And this is where a lot of people get stuck, because they keep waiting for motivation. They think one day they'll finally become that organized, disciplined, meal-prepping, financially elegant person who just naturally makes better choices. Maybe, but probably not in some dramatic overnight transformation. Usually, what actually works is far less exciting. You make the good choice easier. You lower friction. You prepare for the tired version of yourself. That version of you matters more than the ideal version. The tired version orders dinner. The ideal version cooks salmon and vegetables while listening to a podcast about self-mastery. Very inspiring. But the tired version is the one using your debit card. So build for that person. Stock easy meals. Automate bills. Cancel what you never use. Create default routines. Keep your life simple enough that you don't need money to save you 6 times a day. That's step 1. Step 2 is a little more uncomfortable because it has less to do with planning and more to do with identity. A lot of people waste money funding a version of themselves they are not actually living. This one is sneaky. You buy the workout app for the future disciplined you. You buy the fancy groceries for the future healthy you. You buy the premium software for the future creative you. You buy the new clothes for the future put together you. You buy organizational tools for the future calm you. And none of that is automatically bad. Sometimes it's useful. Sometimes it genuinely helps. But sometimes, to be honest, you're not buying a tool. You're buying hope. And hope is expensive when you purchase it over and over without changing your habits. That's why people can have homes full of self-improvement products and still feel stuck. They've built a museum of intentions, a closet full of possible selves, shelves of unopened productivity, health, fitness, beauty, and lifestyle promises. We all do this in some form. I've done it too. You buy something, and for a moment it feels like change has already begun. The object becomes a shortcut to the identity, and that feeling is powerful. It's warm. It's energizing. It feels like progress. But buying the thing is not becoming the person. That gap between the self you fund and the self you practice quietly drains money and confidence at the same time. So instead of spending $500 a month trying to buy your way into a better identity, do this instead. Make smaller promises and keep them. That sounds simple, but it's huge. Don't buy an entirely new life every weekend. Don't redesign yourself through checkout. Pick one behavior. Make it easier. Repeat it. Walk 3 times a week before buying the expensive fitness setup. Cook 4 default meals before loading up on aspirational ingredients. Use the free version before upgrading the app. Organize 1 drawer before buying 10 storage bins. Earn the upgrade through use, not fantasy. That one habit alone can save people hundreds every month. Because once you stop shopping for your imagined self, your spending gets quieter, more honest, more aligned. And ironically, that's when change starts feeling real. Then there's the next trap, paying too much for convenience that isn't really saving your life, just saving your mood. That distinction matters. Convenience is not evil. I love convenience. Everybody loves convenience. The issue is when convenience becomes your default answer to every slight discomfort. That's where the leak starts. Fast shipping, delivery fees, premium upgrades, parking closer, ordering instead of walking, replacing instead of repairing, buying pre-made because you're rushed, paying extra because thinking ahead feels hard. A lot of this spending comes from one quiet belief. My time is too important for inconvenience. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes your time is not being protected. You're just being conditioned to believe every inconvenience is intolerable. Modern life is built around reducing friction. And that sounds amazing until you realize friction is sometimes the thing that protects your wallet. A little pause, a little effort, a little delay. That used to be part of spending. Now, everything is so smooth, you can blow money with the emotional intensity of liking a photo. Tap. Done. Which means you need to create your own friction. Not punishment. Friction. Leave things in the cart for a day. Delete saved payment methods. Unsubscribe from marketing emails. Make certain purchases annoying on purpose. Set one spending threshold where anything above it requires a 24-hour pause. That tiny barrier interrupts emotional spending. It gives your logical brain time to show up. And your logical brain is slow. Annoyingly slow. But useful. I think people often imagine financial success as becoming someone who never wants silly things. That's not realistic. You'll still want silly things. I still want silly things. The trick is giving the moment enough space that the wanting doesn't automatically become the buying. That space is powerful. Because cravings pass. Moods pass. Tiny identity emergencies pass. The urge to reinvent your whole apartment because you had a bad Tuesday usually passes too. And then we have subscriptions, which are, honestly, one of the greatest illusions of modern money. Because subscriptions are rarely evaluated based on reality. They're evaluated based on possibility. You keep the streaming service because you might watch it. The meditation app because you might get your life together. The premium membership because you might start using the benefits. The software because canceling it feels like admitting defeat. And this is where money gets weirdly emotional. Sometimes we don't keep subscriptions for utility. We keep them to preserve a story about ourselves. The story that we are still becoming that person. And maybe we are. But the charge on your card is not evidence of transformation. So do this instead. Once a month, look at recurring charges and ask one brutal question. If this renewed today for the first time, would I still sign up? Not, might I use it later? Not, did I mean well when I started it? Not, does canceling make me feel like a quitter? Would you sign up today? If the answer is no, let it go. That one question can save a ridiculous amount of money because it cuts through history and guilt and fantasy. It brings you back to the present. And really, that's what most better money habits are. Returning yourself to the present. Not the person you meant to be in January. Not the person you'll magically become next month. The person you are right now. The life you actually live right now. The energy you actually have right now. There's another part of this conversation people don't talk about enough, and it's probably the most emotional one. Sometimes you're wasting $500 a month because spending has become your easiest source of pleasure. Not deep joy, not meaning, not connection, just little spikes. A drink, a package, a coffee run, a Target wander, a food delivery, a random treat because the day was long and the week was rude, and life, frankly, has been acting like it pays your bills. And if that's true, I don't think the answer is shame. I think the answer is to build a life with more non-purchased pleasure in it. Because if your only reliable reward system costs money, you're going to keep overspending no matter how many budgeting videos you watch. You need free or cheap forms of enjoyment that actually feel real to you. A walk without your phone. Music while cleaning the kitchen. Coffee at home in a mug you weirdly love. Calling someone who calms your nervous system. Reading in the evening instead of scrolling yourself into wanting things. Cooking one meal you genuinely enjoy. Sitting outside. Going to the library. Rewatching an old movie. Rearranging a room. Making your life feel inhabited, not just managed. That stuff sounds small. It is small. But so are most money leaks. Small things shape life. And there's a deeper point here. People often spend because they are emotionally underfed. Their life has become all output, all task, all pressure, all maintenance. So of course buying something feels like a tiny rebellion, a tiny proof that the day was not allowed to take everything. I get that. I really do. But the more often you use spending as your primary emotional reward, the more it starts to blur together. The purchases stop feeling special, the bank balance gets tighter, and now the reward is creating stress, which makes you want another reward. That loop is brutal. So do this instead. Make pleasure more available without making spending automatic. That's not just a life tip, it's a financial strategy. And now we need to talk about the number itself, $500. Because $500 a month doesn't sound life-changing to some people at first. It sounds helpful, sure, but not transformational. And I think that's because people imagine money only in terms of immediate spending power. They think, what is $500 really? A few bills. Some groceries. Part of rent. But that's too narrow. $500 a month is $6,000 a year. That's a fully funded emergency cushion for a lot of people. That's debt paid off faster. That's investing. That's breathing room. That's saying yes to opportunities because you're not constantly on edge. That's one less low-level panic running in the background of your life. Money is not just about what it buys. It's about what it prevents. It prevents desperation. It prevents certain bad decisions. It prevents tiny emergencies from becoming major ones. It gives you space to think. And I think that's what a lot of people are really craving. Not endless wealth, just enough margin to stop feeling hunted by their own expenses. So if you want to stop wasting $500 a month, here's the real replacement plan. First, stop treating spending like a discipline problem and start treating it like a systems problem. Find the parts of your life that keep producing expensive decisions. Second, stop funding identities you're not practicing. Don't buy your future self in pieces. Build that self through smaller, repeated behaviors. Third, create friction around impulse spending. Make it a little harder to buy things in emotional moments. Fourth, audit convenience. Ask whether it's truly protecting your time or just rescuing your mood. Fifth, cut subscriptions based on present reality, not hopeful attachment. And sixth, maybe most importantly, build more forms of life that feel good without requiring checkout. Because here's the truth most people miss. The goal is not to become the kind of person who never spends. The goal is to become the kind of person whose spending actually matches what matters to them. That's different. Maybe you love good coffee. Great. Keep the coffee and cut the random online shopping. Maybe you love travel. Great. Stop leaking money into conveniences and channel it there. Maybe you love having a peaceful home. Great. Spend deliberately on what supports that and stop buying clutter disguised as improvement. Personal finance gets much easier when it becomes less about restriction and more about alignment. Where do you want your money to go? What do you want it doing for your life? What purchases leave you feeling genuinely glad later? Which ones evaporate the second the transaction clears? Those are important questions. Because wasted money is not just money spent on silly things. It's money spent in ways that don't serve your real life, your real values, or your real future. And to be honest, a lot of people already know the answer. Deep down, they know which purchases feel dead the moment they make them. They know the routines that trigger overspending. They know the categories where they keep buying relief instead of results. What they need is not more guilt. They need permission to change the way their life is set up. To make simpler meals, to have fewer subscriptions, to stop chasing every upgrade, to repeat outfits, to stay home more often, to say no to expensive social defaults, to buy less, choose better, and actually enjoy what they keep. That is not deprivation. That is maturity. That is clarity. That is peace. And peace, weirdly enough, is what most people are really trying to buy anyway. So maybe the point is not to ask, how do I stop wasting $500 a month? Maybe the better question is, what would my life look like if my money stopped cleaning up after my stress, my fatigue, my disorganization, and my impulses? That version of life is calmer, less reactive, less cluttered, less full of tiny financial apologies to yourself. It also feels more adult, in the best possible sense, not boring, grounded. Because when your spending becomes deliberate, your money starts holding its shape. It stops slipping through your fingers. It starts reflecting your choices instead of your moods. And that changes more than your bank account. It changes the story you tell yourself when you wake up. It changes how much trust you have in your own decisions. It changes how much hope feels realistic instead of imaginary. So here's what I want to leave you with. You do not need a whole new personality to fix this. You do not need to become extreme. You do not need to squeeze every pleasure out of your life. You just need to notice where your money is being used as a substitute for calm, for planning, for rest, for meaning, for reward, for identity. Then, little by little, give yourself those things more directly. Cook one easier meal. Cancel one recurring charge. Pause one impulse purchase. Create one low-cost ritual you actually enjoy. Save one piece of the 500 and watch what that feels like. Then do it again. Because real financial change rarely arrives like a thunderclap. It usually shows up quietly in smaller decisions, repeated often enough that one day your account looks different. And, more importantly, your life does too. And that's the real win. Not just having more money. Having less chaos, less leakage, less regret, more intention, more space, more of your life actually belonging to you. And that, to me, is worth a lot more than $500.